I'd like to welcome you to today's conference, the Humanitarian-Development-Peace Nexus, from a decolonial perspective, a bottom-up approach. BICC will have this year its 30th anniversary. It's an institute which owned by the state of North Rhine-Westphalia. In our research and our observations over the last 20, 30 years, it became very clear that if you focus on humanitarian aid or development, you cannot separate it from peace efforts. Here, I think to define aid in a new way, I think it's more or less a challenge we will also discuss here today and tomorrow. And in our understanding, in this regard, we believe that the local turn matters. The perceptions, practices, and institutional settings of local communities need to be better understood and taken serious as a point of departure to improve the HDP nexus.
These multidimensional crises, they need holistic and multi-sectoral, but also cross-mandate solutions. And here the HDP nexus becomes relevant because by interlinking humanitarian aid, development cooperation, and peace building, we believe that we are better, or that we are able to better respond to immediate needs while simultaneously building structures that foster long-term resilience and social cohesion. The close collaboration with NGOs ensures that we will have valuable insights into lessons learned and factors, success factors, but also remaining challenges. And I think this is also the really take from this conference, that we're here together with different perspectives, different capabilities and expertise. And we have the chance today to discuss these things in more depth. I again would like to emphasize that the German government is committed to strengthening and expanding the HDP nexus. We are very grateful to our NGO partners that are here today, that they are joining us on this journey, and they're also pushing us forward, pushing us forward in different ways. While, so the exchange is especially relevant and interesting for us.
While the HDP discourse in the international realm tends to highlight the challenges and strength of UN agencies and INGOs in working with the HDP, in our project and with this conference, we took the decision to reverse this perspective. Instead, we are centering our research on three main aspects at the local level. How do local NGOs and INGOs design and implement the HDP approach locally in villages and in urban areas in Iraq, Mali, and South Sudan? How is aid provided through their projects, and how does this aid impact on local communities? So measuring not only outcomes, but understanding impacts. And how is aid impacted by and does impact on local conflict dynamics? Because as Ms. Sachse also said, we talk about settings of protracted conflicts. As the second reason as to why we chose this conference topic, we decided to focus on the fact that local communities are often seeing themselves as being silenced and as their needs, capabilities, and visions not being taken into account. In this spirit, in this conference, we would like to invite you to a critical and hopefully inspiring exchange over the coming 2 days on the question, to what extent has the HDP been implemented from the bottom up? And in what ways does a decolonial perspective offer new ways forward?
So we have a long history of trying to find the right balance and level of cooperation between different conflict responses, providing humanitarian relief, fostering sustainable development in conflict-affected areas, or fostering peace. But regardless of the operational and structural changes brought about by different and the latest approaches or nexus, another question has risen that fundamentally challenges the aid sector, right? And that is the growing conversation on the Decolonial project. And this is a particular challenge for the aid sector because as we bring discussions or begin to discuss various types of conflict responses and bring them together, we need to think how deeply embedded they are in colonial ideas racialized and global hierarchies and structures. The somewhat recent Black Lives Matter protests, precipitated by the murder of George Floyd in the United States, COVID-19, the Roads Must Fall protests on university campuses that kind of started off in South Africa, and the Decolonize the University and Decolonize Knowledge campaigns that followed, among other things, really, have led for a call with a direct engagement with issues of racial injustice and discrimination, highlighted the importance and relevance of the decolonial project and struggles, and brought questions to the fore about what this means for the aid industry and aid agencies, and what it means for all of us, really. These are recent events, but of course, if we speak of decolonization or decoloniality, this is a set of ideas and practices and struggles that take shape differently across the former colonized world and the global north over the past 500 years. So race and the racialization of populations takes on a deep and disturbing meaning with the advent of European invasions into the global south. The race and racism are the foundation upon which colonialism and imperial expansion are built. Right? The racial categories were used to legitimize conquest, exploitation, and generated forms of social relations based on hierarchy and superiority. Categories were authoritative and acted as signifiers of power that associated, amongst other things, darker skin with backwardness. Right? These territories of uncivilized people were seen as being without their own history or importance. And these are the ideas that still permeate with many people and within aid institutions today. The scholars and historians have traced the colonial origins of aid, copying its racist tendencies and racialized anxieties onto the post-colonial world. So though not explicitly named development or aid until the 1940s, during the 1800s, similar ideas were contained in French policy, for example, of, it was called constructive exploitation, right? The British Empire called it constructive imperialism, right? So such policies suggested a softer form of imperialism where extraction was not the only task, but it occurred alongside more altruistic social programming, right? So the decolonial agenda is about dismantling power hierarchies and decentering different stories, ways of knowing and being, and the methods that we use to do this, really the way that we understand and construct our world. It focuses on dismantling power hierarchies. It is about decentering Europe and whiteness, or Eurocentrism and whiteness. And it is essential within that to reclaim indigenous and marginalized knowledges and ways of being. But decolonized aid really requires a fundamental shift in power and resources within the aid architecture, governments, and the academy. But actually, that shift has to involve a dismantling of those institutions, right? The way that we do things and really the way that we talk about things. And we may not even have that language yet. But it is not just, it's not an easy process, right? It's not just about having slightly different conversations, right? Or perhaps letting local staff speak first at a meeting. Like, this is not what it is, right? It's like a fundamental and radical change. And it doesn't happen in a single moment or an event or by using a toolkit. So whenever I give talks around these things, people always ask for practical solutions. And the practical solution is to really sit in the things that I've mentioned today and think about how your practice is embedded in coloniality, right? Your own power and positionality. It's about self-reflection as a first point. In the meantime, perhaps we take smaller steps to improve what we have, but ultimately a decolonial approach, if that is where we want to go, right, is not about reform. It's about recreation. It's about a radical change. And this really is where the hope lies. Thank you.
The question is to you, would you say that this HDP is at least it has a potential to change what you're trying to change? Thank you.
Okay, this is the HDP. So I guess the point of my talk was that the conversations around kind of integration and the HDP or linking these, short-term relief and long-term development and peace approaches to fostering peace, that's not a new conversation. This is kind of a new paradigm. And whenever we have new paradigms or frameworks, there is some potential there, okay? But it is not going to be a decolonial shift, right? Because it is basically a project that tries to bring together different aid architectures and further integrate them and then maybe localize them. But the fundamental, I mean, the real, if you take nothing else away from the talk, right, is that the aid architecture is deeply rooted, it's embedded in colonialism, right? It's many people would say that aid is coloniality, right? So if we want to talk about a decolonial or decolonizing aid, that fundamentally is I don't want to say an oxymoron, but there is a tension there that really cannot be broken, right? What we can talk about is improving in the short term, as I said at the end of the talk, the way that we do things.
Thank you for your question. I think in IRC we have the term capacity sharing because we think with local partner, we have a structure called peers when we work through a local implementation. Peers is a structure of standard that encourage equality between the two partners. And capacity sharing, one of them, is basically meaning that, yeah, the international organization have some capacity, technical capacity, but also the local NGO have their knowledge of the context, their linkage to the community. And we think that also part of the sharing that we are aiming to through this implementation. So we label it as capacity sharing. I hope that addressed your question.
In our view, we find also some few challenges in implementing this bottom-up approach of this. One, we look at the conceptual and the strategic challenges. There is a lack of clarity and agreement because we have different actors in here. Others are saying they're implementing HDP. Others are thinking of, I think this is a multi-sectoral approach, you see. So still at our cluster level, we find there's a bit of people not understanding exactly what HDP means to their context. And we still find that this also has issues. Donor restrictions, not only with Maltesa, but with other implementing partners. You know, as we have been discussing, donors' priorities are the first thing that people take in the project. If the donor said, this is a humanitarian response, only for providing humanitarian services, there is no way you can divert this to a development project.
Si nous savons la qualité de communauté en matière de HDP, je parle toujours dans le contexte du Mali, plus généralement dans les pays du Sahel, c'est-à-dire le Mali, le Burkina et le Niger qui ont à peu près les mêmes réalités. Voilà. Donc, et si au Mali, on peut dire que déjà les locaux ont cette culture d'abord de faire le nexus sans le savoir. En fait, depuis, ça remonte de très longtemps qu'il y a ce qu'on appelle en langue locale, Jatria, qui veut dire tout simplement qu'on est déjà prêt à accueillir les gens qui ont des problèmes dans leur territoire. On les invite vraiment à venir chez nous et de se recueillir, de prendre la force et de réfléchir à ce qu'ils doivent faire après. Donc, il y a cette culture qui est là dans nos communautés. Donc, quand il y a des attaques ou une population qui a reçu un choc, subitement, il y a des communautés qui accueillent l'autre communauté en faisant l'humanitaire des dons pour ceux qui n'ont plus d'habits, qui n'ont pas de nourriture, qui n'ont plus de vaches pour nourrir les enfants. Il y a tout ceci qui arrive. Mais aussi, ils leur donnent une partie de leur terre qui leur permettent de subvenir à leur nourriture.
In South Sudan, where they adapted a way of understanding how communities perceived levels of insecurity within that area, and it was built on something called the Everyday Peace Indicators, but they adapted it slightly because for something that was more suited in areas that were experiencing high levels of violence. And it involved, firstly, by holding discussions with community members to understand, well, okay, what is it that happens in your day-to-day life that you can describe as a way of you feeling safe and secure?
There's a lot of donor syndrome in South Sudan, particularly not only from the people, from the government itself. That's why they are reneging some of these things. They leave it to to humanitarians to take care of it, simply because they simply know that if there is a crisis, the donors will always come and fill the gap. So to me, it's donor syndrome from the government itself, but they're not investing in development peace, in actual, this small piece, as it were.
Now, my question to you is, IRC claim to be where any other NGO is. In fact, it's correct in Mali. You are the only one in Teneku, which is a place infested with jihadist groups. But you are there. How you manage to be there?
Actuellement, tous les projets que IRC met en œuvre, il y a l'implication des organisations locales. Alors, dans le design, dans la planification et dans la mise en œuvre. L'autre chose aussi, ce qui fait que l'intervention de l'IRC dans ces zones très, très rouges, tu as cité Tenenkou, on intervient aussi à Nara, qui est une zone aussi voilà, contrôlée par ces groupes. Il n'y a plus personne, mais les autorités coutumières sont là. Et donc, le focus est mis sur ces autorités, ces points focaux, comme porte d'entrée pour communiquer l'approche, la vision aux membres des communautés.
A decolonial approach would take into account the power relations within the communities of intervention and the political structures into which they're embedded, because a narrowly conceived bottom-up approach that does not consider the wider political structures will not have lasting effects.
It connects very nicely to my question to you, Ran, because you were saying that what we need is a continuous conflict analysis and a much better understanding of the context. And so I was wondering also here, could you explain to us in what ways, in your view, does this represent decoloniality?
Thank you so much. When I say that there is the need for us to invest and continue to invest in understanding the context, is that our actions are shaped by the realities of the context. And the context is well understood by those receiving the aid. And as such, aid should be informed by the local understanding. And in what we see in most cases is a situation where policies are designed far away and decisions that are impacting on the lives of those receiving aid are made in tables where they're not part of. So the decolonization shift that is required then is to make sure that when those decisions are being made, they are made on the local understanding with and the participation of those receiving aid.
Okay, just one thought, one main key thought, beyond all the other thoughts that turn in my head, as maybe are turning in your head as well. Just one main thought. It's related to what Dr. Rivas said at the beginning, and what I would really like to move forward for myself is acknowledge that our humanitarian aid system is based on colonial perspectives. And if I remember right, please correct me if I'm wrong, the first step was to acknowledge, to accept, then to reflect, and then try to understand and to change. And I think it's very, it's a hard work, but I would really like to do that on the different levels that we work in our NGO. And it's so many levels, but I think it's worth it. Thank you.
What I took out of today in particular was, actually, I would like to go to a phrase which Semaya used from South Sudan, people on the ground in Yei, in South Sudan, or anywhere else where we have been hearing stories about today, actually do it. They do HDP, they don't question it, but they don't have a term for it. Maybe we are curious, I'm actually curious to learn if BIC finds out some local phrases, concepts about it, but I doubt it exists. But the most important thing is they actually do it, and why not just assist them in doing it?
The third big pillar, challenge the system or change the system. And there I said it must hurt. Because actually I think we would fall into a trap if then we just say, yeah, now you said, okay, the tendency that then the institutions say, yeah, we get this decolonization expertise as well into us, and now we are the experts of decolonization and continue talking.
Yes, as you saw, the first panel was focused on the localization and the bottom-up approach, and we had 4 presenters on these topics, and some elements I found interesting from the presentation. The role of the local organization in the framework of HDP implementation has been also a major topic. And I think myself that the inclusion of local NGOs is not a gesture of charity from the INGO. They are forced to do this if they want to get access to some area. I think this is true for some countries than others. For Mali, for example, if you don't work with local NGO, then you cannot get access.
So what could then mean a decolonial perspective, and what could be the ways forward? So Dr. Althea in the morning, she said nothing less than it would need a recreation of the ed system. Wow, and that's exciting. And I could sense the excitement in the room, or I've heard people commenting about it in the break, that this is really exciting. Until you start thinking about what this actually means. What you were saying, that it first means that we have to recognize that the humanitarian assistance, development, cooperation, and also peace building are determined by colonial legacies. And we have to understand what that means, and dismantling the power hierarchies that are still existing, recognizing the white supremacy, and reclaiming indigenous and marginalized knowledge and ways of doing, so that we can then ask the questions differently and maybe think about participation differently. We have also discussed the institutions and the norms and how also changes has been ongoing. And my impression was that actually the HDP, as you said, can change something because it forces the capacity sharing. It forces to really look, and it gives a chance, although we have some negative examples as well, how it didn't work, that it could work towards more equal partnerships.